The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
14:20 in the morning, 14 minutes and 20 seconds worth of sports talk to get you through your daily commute. Hot takes, recaps, best bets, and a little humor to get your day going in the right direction. Sit back, grab your coffee, and let's get into it.
The 14:20 in the morning. Today's show is brought to you by SeatGeek.com, the SeatGeek app. Use promo code 1420SEAT at SeatGeek.com today and save yourself $20 on your first purchase. Remember, we are part of the Belly Up Media Network. Go to bellyupsports.com for all their great sports articles and other great podcasts as well, such as the Sports Stove podcast for the silky smooth sounds of Vince Stover. So make sure you give Vince a check out for sure. And check out the 1420sportsbar.com for a couple of new articles that I put out there. One with Ricky Henderson, near and dear to my heart, obviously, with the how great a ball player was. And then my weekly rendition of Redlinski's ramblings. I've been putting those out more regularly as of late, and I did the final year-end edition. I put that out last night, so make sure on Saturday night. That's what I do now. It's more of a Saturday mid-afternoon, I guess. 5 o'clock. Is that night? Yeah, well, it doesn't much matter. But so make sure you check that out, have a few laughs, share it with everybody, and let me know what you think. And yeah, it's a little bit of work, and you get some of those dumb ideas in your head. You put them down on paper, and whether you laugh or not, I don't know. It's funny to me. Deanne laughed at him, so I guess that's half the battle. If you can get your spouse to have a few laughs, and that's what it is. Anyway, so like I was saying the other day when I gave the Orange Menace there, I gave him a stern finger wagging about what I thought about us becoming the 51st state. That sports and politics doesn't normally mix very well, except when it does. Last night, Alex Ovechkin came back to the ice after a 40-day layaway, broken leg. It's unbelievable. Came back after 40 days. The guy is a machine. There's no getting around that. But it's a little bit of a dicey subject right now. As Ovechkin scored last night, an empty net goal against the Leafs. That he's chasing down. He's chasing down Wayne Gretzky's record of 894 career goals, 35 away from tying, 36 away from beating the whole thing. He's going to get it done, if not this year, for next year for sure. If he didn't get hurt, he probably would have got it done this year. But Ovechkin is he's a staunch supporter of Mr. Vladimir Putin, and it's I'm Ukrainian, as a lot of people know, and so there's I'm not going to go as far as saying there's disdain, but it's not a very good situation, not just with me, but with many different people around the world, many different countries around the world, and the Russians have been told basically they can't participate in any international sporting events. And you go back to 1972 when this whole thing first started with Russians in hockey with the Summit Series. That was a great 2 years before my time, so I wasn't there. But as a Canadian, you're bred into that whole situation. You know all about it. You know all about Henderson and Tretiak and everything that went with it, and the Russian Red Army, how it went through, and then you move on to 1980 with the Russians, the Miracle on Ice, losing to the Americans at Lake Placid, New York, in the Olympics, and everybody knows that story. That great Russian team that got beat by a bunch of college kids in Lake Placid, New York, in that 1980 Olympiad. And the stories go on and on. You think about '86, the Canada Cups, and the '87 Canada Cup, and the Piashkani Punch Out, and the Olympics, and the World Junior Tournaments, and all the years that Russian hockey and international hockey have been intertwined. And especially with Canadian hockey as well. A lot of Russians obviously were part of that too, or American teams were part of that as well. But it's more of a Canadian-Russian thing, and you just learn to just like Niet Soviet. You remember the posters and things people would bring to the Canada Cup games back when I was a kid. So there's always been a bit of a disdain for the Russians, and it's just one of those things. It's just how it is, and yeah, the wall came down, and we won't get too political in it because I don't know a whole bunch about. I know enough about it just to be dangerous. But you just think that it's really kind of a strange situation now that you have with the Russian Hockey Federation and sports in general not being allowed to be in the Olympics, in all sports, not just hockey. But you have the Russians now not being allowed to play once again in the World Juniors this year. Once they're not going to be allowed in the Four Nations Cup coming up. I think it's in February. So I haven't wrapped my head around that whole thing, how that's going to turn out. I don't think it's going to go over very well, but that's just me. But the Russians not being allowed to participate in the World Junior, maybe that's one of the things that's brought it down a little bit. It's just not the same competitiveness, not the same disdain that you have for the Russian teams, not the players themselves, but just the Russians in general. There's just a built-in, when it comes to Canadian hockey, there's just a built-in dislike for the Russians, and it was always a great. You get up whatever time of the was played overseas. You would get up at whatever time to watch that Russian game, and sometimes that Russian game was on New Year's Eve. You remember the great Jordan Eberle game in 2000? Geez, that's 2012, 13. I can't. 2010. I can't remember. There's so many of those damn things that happened, but the Eberle one's obviously one of the greatest moments in not only World Junior history but Canadian hockey history. That guy's lived off that goal for a very, very long time, and rightfully so. Get back to what I was talking about here, though, is that with the Russians not being allowed to participate in these events, it has watered down a lot of sporting events around the world, because the Russians are a world superpower. Obviously, getting into that, but here's where it gets a little bit of a spice, turns into a spicy meatball. You have Ovechkin, who's chasing. He needs, like I said, he's a staunch supporter of Putin and his political ways. Whether how that came about, I don't know, but whether there's some underhanded mafia kind of stuff going on there. There's been rumors and speculation for years about that, but Ovechkin's been known to take pictures and be very photogenic with Mr. Vladimir Putin, who, by all intent and purpose, isn't a very good guy. Whether you believe in what's going on down with the Orange Menace and him, that's another story for another day. We're not going to get too political here, but that's just the backhand story of it. So you have a bit of a situation there where you watch the Ovechkin goal chase, and you can cheer him on a little bit because you're a hockey fan, and no one thought that record would ever be broken. And Ovechkin, he's the greatest goal scorer of all time. Yes, he's still chasing Gretzky, but he's like Ovechkin played a lot of years in the National Hockey League when there wasn't a lot of goal scoring going on. Gretzky played a lot of years in the National Hockey League where there's a lot of goal scoring going on, and I mean a lot. The goalies weren't very good. The athleticism wasn't very good. Gretzky was a head and shoulders above. He's the greatest to ever play the game. But it's just goal scoring is at a premium for a lot of Ovechkin's years, and he's been the best to do it in my lifetime and most anybody's lifetime. I think that's indisputable. So cheering on the back end of things is like the hockey end of things. Hey, that's great, but then you go, Jesus, like how can I cheer for this guy when he's a Putin backer? My father, God rest his soul, his favorite player was. It was Alexander Ovechkin when he was living. He's always enjoyed Ovi scoring goals, and Ovi he looks a little bit rough these days, but he's still going out there and rolling. He's a guy's a machine. But like my dad, obviously being of Ukrainian descent, you don't know how he would feel now, how the times are, or dad might have, it's out of my control. I'm just going to watch sports. And maybe that's how it should be. It's just an odd situation that you have like around the National Hockey League where these other players are flourishing and not having any bit of a pushback, I guess, for the National Hockey League. But then the Russian team can't participate in that Four Nations Cup, which is an NHL-based event. Yes, the hockey federations do get involved, but it's an NHL-based event. So you have all these players that are of Russian descent and Russian heritage that are playing in the National Hockey League, but their national team can't participate. So the NHL is talking out of both sides of their mouths, and it's because of money. Like Igor Shesterkin, goaltender for the Rangers, and that's a bad hockey team. I'll have to get Brian back on, but that's a bad hockey team. They're just not showing any life. They're trying to get their coach fired. Like it's just gone. It's a done deal with that. With Laviolette, he should probably go. But we'll get back to that later on, probably this week. It's Shesterkin. He's flourishing, obviously, with the Rangers, even though the team's bad. Just signed the most lucrative deal for a goaltender in NHL history, so he's doing okay. You got Nikita Kucherov with the Tampa Bay Lightning. He's obviously doing okay. He's got making how much money every year, one of the best players in the National Hockey League, in the MVP conversation, and so he's doing okay. You have Sergei Bobrovsky, goaltender for the Florida Panthers. He was the most valuable or best athlete in Russia, as voted by their press last year after winning a Stanley Cup with the Florida Panthers. So he's doing okay. So the Russians not being allowed to participate as a team kind of confuses me, because all of these players are flourishing in the National Hockey League and making pretty good penny doing it. And then they're going to, like in the coming weeks and months ahead, you're going to see that National Hockey League really pushing the Ovechkin thing a lot. Like that's going to be everywhere you can possibly imagine, the Ovechkin goal chase, and on it goes. But the Russians aren't allowed to participate as a team event. And then you go to this World Junior team, which I don't agree that the world because politics and sports don't mix until they do. Should these kids who are 17 to 19 years old, should they be not being allowed to participate in sports in as a team event in the World Juniors? I think they should. These kids had nothing at all to do with what happened with the Russians invading Ukraine. There were a bunch of kids back then, 14 to 15 years old. What did they have to do? They had no say in it. So why are they being punished for something that their government did? Like it's crazy to me that these sports factions can talk out of both sides of their mouth and then not allow their other people to participate. Like the individual, like Ovechkin's not starving. Bobrovsky's not going to be starving. He makes 10 million a year. Kucherov makes how many million a year? Shesterkin's making how many million a year? And then on it goes with these kids, and then you just can't get anything going on. Daniel Smooth, here he goes. The majority of the league has Russian, Eastern European players. The fact the league is punishing players who weren't involved is stupid, and that's what I'm getting at. And we're gonna we'll get together in the coming week or so and get together and do a show. But that's exactly what I was saying here. Is that why are these kids being punished for something they had nothing to do with, but then the ones who might have something to do with it, because it's kind of well known that Ovechkin is kind of been doing some things behind the scenes, and he's been money here and there that goes with it. So it's just an odd thing. If Russia was allowed in the tournament, the Russians win the whole thing. That's very possible. You think about their goaltending alone. Their goaltending alone is better than Canada's. Like it's so you just go look at that thing with that Four Nations Cup. You look at the World Junior Tournament. Like the Russians were always involved in this. And the thing that kind of makes it really strange for me is that you see a Russian team back in 1972 playing against Canada in that Summit Series. In 1980 against at the height of the Cold War, the height of it. Like why were the Olympic teams allowed to play back then? Like you just got to think that something's really fishy here. But now you have all these owners who are saying, my guy's got to play, my guy can play, here it is. But like 1980, when the Cold War was at its height, and you didn't know if there was a nuclear bomb pointed at your head. And this is the thing. Like this is an actual thing. So why are these players not allowed to play now when in 1980, I'm certain, I can't remember who that was. Was it Gorbachev, whoever the guy was back in that Khrushchev and Gorbachev, and on it goes with those guys. I'm sure there was some underhanded crap going on back then too. So what the heck's the difference now? Like, what's the heck is the difference now? Are we just being more? Well, they can't. Well, the Russians, for in my lifetime, and that's one thing I've never understood. In my lifetime, which is now 50 years, the Russians were always the bad guys, whether that was warranted or not. The Russians were the bad guys forever. And all of a sudden, there's a soft spot for them for certain reasons. Let them be the bad guys. Let them come and play, because it was always Niet Soviet. We cheered against them no matter what. Canadians in 1980, I remember it. I was 6 years old, but I remember it. I remember everybody was cheering for the USA on that Sunday afternoon because everybody hated the Soviets. So what's changed? So why aren't these guys allowed to play? But then the NHL guys are more than welcome to make as much money as possible. So if you can't talk out of both sides of your mouth with this situation, especially when it comes to this Four Nations Cup, it should be Sweden, Canada, USA, Russia. Done. If you're only going to have 4 teams, those should be the 4. If you want to draw eyeballs this thing, no one cares about Finland. Sorry, Finland. People barely well, you know why Sweden will never win? Too many Swedes. So it should be these. If you want people to watch this thing, Russia should be involved. Why are we persecuting a bunch of hockey players who don't even live there? Most of the guys are in the National Hockey League. So why can't they just play? It makes zero sense. But allow them to play. Then they're going to promote Ovechkin like crazy in the coming weeks and months ahead to pass Gretzky. So what are we doing? Either do it or don't. You can't pick and choose when you can be political with this stuff, especially when it comes to sports. It makes zero sense. Zero sense why this has gotten to this point. The Russians have always, in my eyes, been not upstanding. Whether I'm right or wrong, I don't know. I'm not a history buff by any means. But I just know that forever, Russia was always thought as like the bad people. Not all of the people, just the ones who govern it. Some people, you're born into situations, and that's what these kids are. Like these World Junior kids are just born into a bad situation. So what are we doing? Bobrovsky's allowed to make 10 million a year. Shesterkin's making 12. Ovechkin's making how much for how many years? Kucherov, and then welcome him back. Here you go. Come on in. But they can't make it. Now you have kids who are losing on their opportunity to play. Yes, they have their own league over there and everything, but the National Hockey League is still the where they make their most money, and on it goes. So why it gets to this point and that we're at now, I do not understand it. I do not understand it. It's a major dilemma. Do you have to like Ovechkin's political thoughts? I shouldn't even know him. Shouldn't even know what his political thoughts are, but we do. So am I allowed to cheer on when and watch and be on the Gretzky watch or the pass the watch the goal scoring watch? Yeah, doesn't make me a bad person. Doesn't make me a bad person at all. Should I be wishing bad things on him so he doesn't break Gretzky's record? No, because Gretzky the last few weeks hasn't actually been one of my favorites either, for political reasons. See, so it leaks in. I guess the older you get, the more this political stuff just kind of just goes into your system. But it's just you just think it's just awfully weird how you can cheer for a guy, but then you can't cheer for their politics. Well, then don't follow their politics. But it's hard not to when it comes to something as big as the Russia-Ukraine conflict, obviously. It's a major. There's no getting around that. But you don't understand. I just don't understand how it's either it should be all or nothing when it comes to this stuff. All or nothing. If you're going to allow this guy to do this and this guy to do this, you got to let them all do it. Is the Russia getting like is the country of Russia getting beat down because they're not allowed to come to these tournaments? No, it's only hurting a select few people. It's hurting a select few people in all sports. Like these athletes who miss out on Olympic Games, they're missing out on 2 Olympic Games. This will all get resolved eventually, like it always does. Like I'm not downplaying the Ukraine thing. Obviously, I'm not, because it's obviously part of my heritage. But it'll be over with, and then eventually the next generation will be allowed to participate in the Olympics, and the next generation will be allowed to participate in the World Juniors and the Olympic and whatever it might be. The next 4 nations face off. I think it's a stupid name too, but you just wonder when and why these decision makers, how they go, well, we'll do this, but you can't do this. Yes, it's a privately owned system. I get that. But it just, if they can't participate in the 4 nations thing, which is an NHL entity, then why are the players allowed to play in the National Hockey League? What's the difference? Like, what is the difference? Are they like, I don't know if they're, and if somebody wants to let me know in the comment section or shoot me an email or a text or a DM or an IM or whatever you call them. I don't understand. Like, are these guys American citizens now? I don't know. It just seems really odd that Ovechkin kind of, people don't like him for the Putin stuff, but the NHL is going to promote the hell out of it, make a bunch of money. It always comes down to money. I understand that, but it's a really odd situation. I like for own personal selfish reasons, I really wish that the Russians were still allowed to play in these international hockey events, because it just makes it better. The nostalgia of it all, excuse me, the history of it all. Are you really a champion if you don't beat the Russians? Probably not. I mean, yeah, you won, but you didn't play all the best teams in the world, because the Russians are still, have the most talent. Like in the NHL right now, you have a guy who's that kid that plays in Minnesota, Krill. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. I had a good segue there, a good story there, and I can't remember what the heck his name was. That doesn't I'm not even gonna look it up. Krill Kaprizov. I was right, Kaprizov. But so you have all these Russians who are still great hockey players, and you just how they're not allowed to participate as a group. It's a bit strange to me. Anyways, there's my thoughts and shots on this Sunday. Didn't even swear. There's my thoughts and shots on this Sunday. Days coming to it. The year's coming to an end. 29th, New Year's Eve plans. Ball drop at 10 o'clock Eastern at Mountain Standard Time. Watch the one at midnight Eastern. There's my advice to you once again. Deanne doesn't know that's what we're doing yet, but that's what my plan is. Okay? Very smart. Bed by 10:15. So I'm going to do anyways. The 1420 Sports Bar podcast. I want to know, actually, like people who listen to the show, make sure you get back to me and let me know what your thoughts are on this Russian thing. Because I'm very intrigued. I'm very intrigued to think what people are thinking about this Russian thing. Should they be allowed to play? Should they not be allowed to play? Should the teams be allowed to come and play in the World Juniors or the Four Nations Cup or the Olympics? And if not, why are the players allowed to play in the National Hockey League? Because they're talking about both sides of their mouth. So I'm really interested to hear what people have to say about that. Because it's a spicy meatball for sure. Anyways, the 1420 Sports Bar podcast, 1420 in the morning, is brought to you by SeatGeek.com and the SeatGeek app. Use promo code 1420SEAT at SeatGeek.com today and save yourself $20 on your first purchase over there at SeatGeek, and it helps support the show. Anyways, here's a little word from our friends over at Righteous Felon Jerky. Righteous Felon Craft Jerky is the official jerky of Belly Up Sports. For over a decade, Righteous Felon Craft Jerky has led the American meat snack revolution by concocting delicious, adventurous, U.S.-sourced jerky recipes for uncompromising carnivores across the country. With 15 different flavors to choose from, Righteous Felon has all jerky lovers covered, and by using promo code BELLYUP, you will get 15% off your purchase at RighteousFelon.com. Do your taste buds a favor today and rip into a bag of Righteous Felon Jerky. All right, Righteous Felon Jerky, a proud supporter of the Belly Up Media Network. So go to righteousfelon.com, use promo code BELLYUP to save yourself 15% on the best in craft jerky. If you're a Canadian, go down across the border, get someone to bring it back for you. They have a mailing address. Do it that way. There's always a way to get Righteous Felon Jerky. Just a walking billboard, hey? Anyways, that's it for a show for today. Thanks for listening. Thanks for those who tuned in live. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out the 1420sportsbar.com. Check out Red Linsky's Ramblings. And before the year's over, I got what I'm going to do on, I think, Tuesday, Aaron from Brutally Honest Sports, kind of a regular on the old show now. We're going to do a best of the year, highs and lows. I'm looking for another couple people to come on that and talk about the highs and lows of the year. Obviously, there's a couple of highs and lows. It's weird how a high and a low, your team gets the World Series as a high, and your team doesn't win the World Series as a low. So it's really interesting to see how that's all going to shake out. Always fun talking with Aaron on from Brutally Honest Sports. Yes, wise beyond his years. He's scared of becoming 30, he told me last week. I don't know if that was on the air or not. He doesn't want to become 30, so wait till you turn 50. It's one of those things. Like I said, the schedule will be out. I'll put it out on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, what the show schedule is going to be for the foreseeable future, what we're going to try to accomplish in the new year. But there's lots happening here at 1420 World Headquarters. Enjoy your Sunday. Have a great New Year's. I'm sure we'll talk a couple of times before then, but make sure you play. And hey, Canada plays. They play tonight, Germany at 5 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, 7 o'clock Eastern. Check your local listings and go Canada, go and win one tonight. Gotta get back on the win column tonight and get it done. You know that Latvia team played pretty good yesterday against the U.S. because I think they just ran out of gas because they played less than 24 hours before against Canada, and they played that game tight with the Americans yesterday. The Americans are really good. But that Latvian team, that wasn't a fluke against Canada. I mean, Canada crapped the bed. Didn't swear once, and it is getting better at that. Anyways, the 1420 Sports Bar podcast and 1420 in the morning. 4 beer or coffee. It's Sunday. Put some Baileys in your coffee, whatever it may be. Remember, it doesn't matter where you are. It's who you're with. Have a great Sunday, and we will talk to everybody probably tomorrow. Cheers.
You just listened to the 1420 Sports Bar podcast. 4 beer with the sports talk and a whole lot more. We are part of the Belly Up Media Network. Let's get into it.